Dr. Rob Zatechka, what is up, my friend?
Happy weekend. How are you doing?
You know, I'm coming off my birthday weekend, and I need to personally thank you. You would think Dr. Rob for how much beer we drink on this podcast. And by the way, I'm drinking a smoothie. It's a hazy IPA from 6 Point Brewing Company in Brooklyn, New York. This is 6.5.
From 6 Point Brewing?
Yeah.
So this was from Jason Werner. So Jason's our man in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So he hooks us up yearly with like the mega gift pack of beer. And it's he's a craft brewery guy. He's a craft beer guy. So he likes anything new and different. And so he'll try lots of different stuff from the whole Northeast region. So he's kind of our go-to for the Northeast. A lot of Pennsylvania, Ohio beers, he's always got kind of a handful, some New York, a few New England ones thrown into the mix. So there's always some cool stuff there, but it's a great one. So Jason and I were trading some texts earlier, and we were talking about 6 Point Brewing, and he said, this ought to be like the official beer of Iowa football.
Wow. Well, hell,
get it?
0 points last night against Penn State.
6 point. He said it's their season average.
Man, we're going to get it more into that game and more about the Big Ten West Division a little bit later on in this podcast, but it was atrocious. There were stats. I've been covering football for almost 30 years now. There were stats in that game I've never seen before. We'll go over them a little bit later on, but I'm going to go on record right now. Before this podcast even starts, I know, Owen, you were giving me a hard time last week.
A Northern Iowa Panther fan.
No, I'm going to make a bold statement here. And people are going to think I'm crazy. Owen thought I was crazy to say.
Well, they already think you are.
Owen thought I was crazy for taking Nebraska and the over at 6.5 for season wins. I'm telling you right now, the West is so bad, Nebraska can still win the West Division. I know that's a bold statement. Iowa, Wisconsin right now are going to be the leaders.
I get it, but you're going to tell me that you look at the general dynamic within the conference in terms of new coaches versus established coaches, and you're going to tell me that a team, I was going to say a team that doesn't have an established coach that's been here a while is going to really have a chance to win it. On the flip side, you got Fleck going down to
Northwestern
to a interim coach, former coordinator at Northwestern. So.
Well, okay, let's just dive right in. I was going to save this for later on. Let's just dive right into the Big Ten West. Okay?
Let's do it. They suck.
It is horrible.
It is not a good division.
It is absolutely stinking horrible.
I've got hope for a lot of these teams, though.
Hope for what?
Well, I think Luke's a pretty good coach up there at Wisconsin. He's had success.
I understand that, but that's not saying they're not beatable. I look at everybody in the West Division, and they are beatable teams.
This year they are.
Yes.
They're a disaster. But, you look at Fickell and what he did at Cincinnati. He's got a great track record as a defensive coach. I think Wisconsin's going to be very good. You go back to sort of mid-late summer, and there was a lot of anxiety amongst Nebraska fans sitting around going like, God, did we get the right guy? Maybe we should have gone after Fickell. Maybe that's who we really should have gone
But you
after.
can say that about Lance Leipold. You can say that about anybody, right?
Well, did you see my tweet earlier today?
I did see it, and that's why I brought it up.
Well, because you go back to a couple of weeks ago, and people were like, oh, my God, look at what Leipold's doing at Kansas. They had a really nice win over BYU on Saturday. And everybody's sitting there going like, okay, God, did we get the wrong guy? We should have gone after Leipold. Why didn't we go after somebody, not necessarily Dion, but somebody who would have done something like what Dion did at Colorado? Come in, blow everything up, raid the transfer portal, dump the current roster, and we're going to completely change everything over in one foul swoop. Now, what's interesting is two things. Number one, Lance Leipold went 2-10 his first year.
Yeah. Yep.
You think KU fans were sitting around going like, great, we got the right guy here. They are now.
True.
They loved him last year. And he went 6-7 last year. Did lose a bowl game. I think he lost the bowl game. I'd have to double check. I think he went into the bowl 6-6. I didn't think he was one of those exception teams that went in at at 5-7 and then won the bowl. Trav's looking it up right now.
I'm looking up. I don't know if you'll
either
find
way,
it.
though, he was 6-7 his second year, but he had some really nice wins his second year. He kind of had those, hey, we're making some changes, we're making some headway type wins his second year. And this year they're, 3-0, 4-0?
They're 4-0 now.
So they're 4-0. I understand. It's easy to look at a team like Kansas and go like, God, we should have gone after that guy. Keep in mind, he was 2-10 his first year. It's not like he had a great year.
How soon we forget the classic Liberty Bowl of last year that went to overtime where Arkansas won 55-53 over KU.
There you go. Which, by the way, I watched that game. Now I remember. That was a fun game to watch. But you look at Colorado even where everybody was like, why couldn't we have gotten somebody who would come in and immediately blow shit up and completely change things over, and we'd be winning right away too. And I think people were talking about that, and dude, all it took was one game, and all of a sudden everybody's like, yeah, freaking look at Colorado, screw those guys. Thank God we don't have Dion.
Do you agree or disagree with me that Nebraska can win the West? Because I'm not saying they're going to. I'm saying there's a pathway there.
On paper, there's a pathway there. I mean, you've already got a West Division loss.
You know, I was gonna say they're gonna look back, and that Minnesota loss right now
is going to haunt them.
Is going to haunt Nebraska.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I would freaking love that if we get to the end of the season and we're sitting here going like, oh my God, that freaking loss to Minnesota is what kept us out of the Big Ten title game. If we have that year one, I'm ecstatic. I will take that.
Yeah, but let's not forget how bad the West is, right?
No, I get it, but that also means your prediction of Nebraska taking where you took the over at 6.5 probably means you're coming out on top there.
I would agree with that. Now, there's still a possibility. Iowa could go 11-1. I want you to go look at Iowa's schedule and go, yeah, it's possible. They have to go to Wisconsin yet, and they have to go to Nebraska, which I think are the hardest games the Hawks have left. They got blown out last night at Penn State, and it just highlights how bad the West is, because when I say Iowa can go 11-1, it really can because the schedule's so bad. Iowa, Rob, these are the stats that blow me away. And I know people are going, oh, here we go. We're going to talk about Iowa. This is about the Big Ten West in general. Okay.
Well, and we talk about Iowa a lot. I mean, God, we've got more Iowa swag hanging on the walls here. Of course, one doesn't have a lower jaw, but hey.
Iowa ran, are you ready for this? 33 offensive plays.
Yeah, that's sad.
33 offensive plays. They were on the Penn State offense. Led time of possession 45 plus change.
Yes, basically
15 plus change.
Yes, basically 45 to 15.
It was
That's
ugly.
A brutal stat, by the way.
The Iowa defense combined, I've never seen this, combined for 100 tackles.
Yeah, that's nuts. When you're on the field for 45 minutes, you're going to get that.
Penn State, in today's game that was supposed to speed up, you're supposed to be, you need to lower the plays. Penn State ran 97 plays last night.
Which is funny because that's the type of stat that you would see from one of these like Houston teams from the early 1990s.
Yes,
with like Andre
Ware?
Yeah.
David Klingler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like air raid Texas Tech kind of stuff where it's just play after play after play after play after play. That's the kind of numbers you'd expect, and that is not what Penn State does.
Penn State's a really good football team. The crazy thing is that went to halftime. It was a 10-0 game.
Which, you were talking about after because you guys do the pre- and post-game Hawkeye call-in show.
I just do the post-game, but yeah.
Okay, so you and Ross are doing that.
Yep.
You told me before we were doing the show, I asked you how did it go, and you said there were a lot of people complaining about the defense.
I mean, when you have to give up 97 plays,
those guys had to, dude. The third stringers had to have been exhausted.
Oh, it was crazy. Now let's take a look at the West Division over the weekend. Wisconsin beat Purdue on Friday night, 38-17. Penn State beat Iowa 31-0. Illinois beat Florida Atlantic 23-17.
Not exactly a resounding statement there. Which I think Kansas is pretty good. Don't get me wrong. They're not great yet, but that's a pretty good team. Kansas beat Illinois. Illinois is not that good of a team.
And this is year 3 of Brett Bielema. You almost feel like this team is regressing, not getting better.
His first 2 years, I thought they were on. I think there was a little bit of a step back here with some graduation losses he had.
Northwestern rallies to beat Minnesota in overtime 37-34.
I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Dude, that's horrible. That is absolutely
when
horrible.
we watched that Nebraska-Minnesota game, I thought Minnesota definitely I thought Nebraska exposed some deficiencies in that team. I thought they'd shore a few of those things up, and we're just not seeing it quite yet.
So, remember it used to be the Legends and Leaders Division, which was the dumbest thing I think I've ever remembered. Since they've gone to the East-West Division, how many times has the West won a Big Ten championship?
I know Wisconsin has at least.
That was the Leaders and Legends Division.
So Wisconsin's got the one there, but that was it.
Was that
the Russell Wilson year?
Yeah, that's the year they kicked Nebraska's butt. Okay, since they've gone to East-West, the West has never won a Big Ten title ever.
Wow.
And
what about 2015 when Iowa had that undefeated season?
No, they lost to Michigan State. You remember that well.
But they were undefeated.
No, they weren't. They were 12-2. They lost to Michigan State, and they lost to Stanford in the Rose Bowl.
I'm not sure I'd call that a loss in the Rose Bowl.
That was a butt kicking.
That was a dirt road.
It's funny. I asked the question last night. Have you ever seen an Iowa team play worse? They're like, Rose Bowl. I said, no, it wasn't, because you ran 33 plays. Rob, 33 plays.
Yeah,
that was like a first quarter for you back in the day.
They played better in the 2016 Rose Bowl game than they did against Penn State
yesterday. The West is horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Sad.
Now, Nebraska's got an important. Nebraska not going to go. They're not going to beat Michigan. Sorry, they're not going to beat Michigan. Michigan's really good.
They're a very good team.
But I think there's an important 4-game stretch that could determine Nebraska's fate in the West Division. Illinois.
But here's the thing. The way this works out, it doesn't matter if your win or loss is in division or out of division. If it's a conference loss, it counts.
True.
They're 0-2 after next week in the conference.
Okay, but I'm going to assume that the West is so bad, you're going to see Wisconsin lose a game or two to somebody they shouldn't lose to, or lose, and Iowa could lose again too. I think Iowa and Wisconsin are your teams to beat in the West. I really still believe that.
I don't see, even if Nebraska solidifies a few things and plays much better going forward, God, I have trouble seeing them finishing in any higher than third in the division.
Okay, I can respect that. But I think an important 4-game stretch, really, after the Michigan game, at Illinois,
winnable.
You get Northwestern at home.
Winnable.
Purdue at home.
Winnable.
At Michigan State, that's winnable.
Yeah.
Michigan State, if it loses to Iowa this weekend, might as well just kick the season in.
You think guys cash it in?
Yes.
What I wonder is at some point Michigan State, do you see guys start hitting the portal?
Maybe.
I mean, the writing's on the wall for Mel Tucker. Do you see them keeping Mel?
No. They've already told him that he's going to get fired. He had like 7 days to respond.
They're just working. They're just working on the behind the scenes buyout shit right now.
Well, I don't even know if they're doing buyout because they told him they're going to fire him with cause. Now he needs to come back.
Yeah, but they got it. They're going to give him something. They're going to offer him something to take the firing with cause and go away.
And I would assume that's the case.
But either way, if you're a Michigan State player, God, that's a tough situation to have to be in. But yeah, if they lose that one, I think they cash it in before Nebraska.
So I think they beat Illinois. I think they beat Northwestern. I think they beat Purdue. I think they beat Michigan State. The interesting game is how they finish. Maryland's an interesting.
God, they got some offense.
They do.
They put up some yardage and they put up some points on yesterday.
But you know what Nebraska has? Pretty good defense.
They really do. I'll be curious to see how that one goes because, I mean, the last few years, that's a game that was still a little bit of a dogfight. I think it's a well-coached team. I think they've got some players. They got a Tagovailoa on the roster. I mean, that always helps.
And then it goes to Wisconsin and Iowa at home. Listen, you know me. I would sit here and tout the Hawkeyes as much as anybody, but with no offense whatsoever, and Nebraska winning in Iowa City last year.
Here's my worry about Nebraska versus Iowa this year. Remove Trey Palmer from last year's Nebraska-Iowa game. Does Nebraska win that game?
Probably not.
It gets really tough. Because keep in mind, think of all those turnovers Iowa had, and at the end of the day, they lost by what? 1 touchdown. I mean, you look at the stats that we've talked about with Scott Spreitzer on the behind the point spread
and what turnovers mean,
and how powerful a statistic that is.
And if you want to know what Nebraska that statistic is,
Nebraska should have. If you go by those stats, Nebraska should have beat. I'm doing the math in my head here, and I'm going to have to loop back around to it. Nebraska should have beat Iowa by like 15 to 18 points last year. They won by 7.
And if you want to know the stat we're talking about, go back to our YouTube page. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today. You won't regret it. There's a lot of good information there. But I think if you go to week 3 of Behind the Point Spread, there's a really good statistic on there where we talk about the importance of turnover margin.
Well, then the next week he hits the what is
field position.
Well, the finishing the drive statistic and how that plays into
once you get to your opponent's 40-yard line, what that really means in being able to finish those drives, and that's a stat he came up with on his own.
Yeah, that right now I'm kind of like pubbing our own stuff here a little bit.
And it's okay. That's called promoting your own content.
I love our podcast. I love you. I love producer Owen.
You hear that, Owen? You're getting some love over there, man. He loves you.
Owen gets all the love.
He does.
Dude, the doc's diagnosis is great. Right now, in my opinion, if you want the best, and I'm going to phrase it this way, the smartest college football podcast show, however you want to phrase it,
is Behind the Point Spread.
Is Behind the Point Spread. You don't have to be into gambling at all. You will learn more stuff watching that show 45 minutes to an hour Wednesday nights than you will from anything else.
And you know, this podcast usually goes an hour, 10 hour and a half sometimes. We could easily, if we just didn't pick 4 games, we could easily do 2 to 3 hours
on Behind the Point Spread.
Yes, absolutely,
dude. It is amazing. We've barely scratched the surface of the stuff that Scott knows.
We can bring that up with Scott, and if you haven't watched it yet, it's going to be Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Central Time. It's live on our YouTube channel. You can also find it live on our Facebook page. Just search Doc Talk Sports. Give the channel a subscribe. You will not regret it. You can call in. It's a live call-in show. You can interact on Facebook and YouTube comments. So if you have questions, and Rob brings up a good point. We talk about the point spread. We talk about the over-under. But there's so much more different information.
It is a college football show.
Yeah. So... so I think that the interesting part is the Maryland, Wisconsin, and Iowa games. That's where you'll figure out if Nebraska finishes 3rd or maybe a little bit higher. If they can pull it off.
That's I look at that and I'm like, God, if Nebraska comes out of those 3 games 1 and 2, I'm probably pretty happy.
Yeah.
Now I say that after the first 2 games, I legit thought Nebraska was going to be 1 and 1. Little bummed they went 0-2. I get it. It's hard to predict that stuff. If Nebraska can come out of the Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa run at 1 and 2, I'm going to say I'm happy with that.
You know, the interesting part is that ifs and buts are candy and nuts every day to be Christmas, right? But that Minnesota loss is that's going to be the one that bites you in the ass. It really is.
It is. I mean, you talk about that playing into the Big Ten West. Probably my bigger fear is, do we get to the end of the year and that's the game that keeps Nebraska out of a bowl game?
Ooh. If it is, that means I didn't hit the over. So
yeah, I mean, that's the thing I worry about because I think it is incredibly underrated how big a deal that is for teams. And it's getting to that postseason, you are tacking on a month to your season.
Yeah.
Basically, you're adding a month to your season, a month's worth of practice. So, and the way I describe that to people, or the way I explain it to people in terms of the impact that has, if you look at a guy that plays 3 to 4 years of college football for a team, whatever team, if it is a team that goes to a bowl game year in and year out, let's take Nebraska of the 1990s, because that's when I was there. Every year, you were going to go to a bowl game. If you were a guy that redshirted and played, by the time you got to the bowl game as a fifth-year senior, you had 5 additional months under your belt of college football that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And if you think about, well, let's say August, September, October, November, because the college football season ends end of November, and then it's bowl game or playoff season after that. It's 4 months. So you're getting, if you're a fifth-year senior going to a bowl game, as you're going into that bowl game, you actually have the equivalent of a little bit more than a sixth year of experience over somebody who hasn't gone to a bowl game consistently.
I never thought of it like that. You always hear about the extra practice time, but when you put it in that number, it makes a lot more sense.
If you're a team that consistently goes to a bowl game every year, by the time a kid's a senior, they've essentially racked up an additional season of practice time just by virtue of the fact they're going to a bowl most years.
Wow, that those are like numbers that can use behind the point spread. I mean,
exactly.
Because that does make a difference.
That's a lot of developmental and practice time for a guy.
Of course, behind the point spread is presented by Betfred Sports, and Fred is your guy when you want to bet more bonuses, more bets. Right now, when you bet. If you bet and your team loses in overtime, you're going to get your money back. What a great deal! So if your team goes to overtime, you're going to get your money back. Loses. Not a bad deal. When you bet on a player to score first, you get double the price if they score twice. New customers can get more than $1,000 in bonuses. Betfred is the bonus king. Terms and conditions do apply. You got to be 21 plus. Wagers only accepted in the states where Betfred is doing business. You can find those at betfredsports.com. And if you do have a gambling problem, call 1-800-BETS-OFF. Of course, Nebraska is coming off a 28-14 win over La Tech. That's why we made a pivot, right? We were going to start talking off about that game, but the Big Ten West just seemed much more of an interesting topic because we're talking about Louisiana Tech.
Does anybody really care about La Tech?
Well, it was weird, Rob, because I texted you. You were at the Augustana game yesterday, and I'm like, dude, it's 7-7 at halftime. This isn't what it was supposed to be.
No. Well, and if you listen to, again, when we were talking to Scott about the power ratings, he said La Tech was what? I mean,
horrible, brutal.
It was in like the hundreds.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Now, let's talk about the positive to start with. And another reason to subscribe to the Doc Talk Sports YouTube channel is the Doc's Diagnosis presented by Centris Federal Credit Union. We each and every week, and because Rob's an offensive tackle, he tends to focus a lot on the offensive line, which is fine. But the rush block game for Nebraska, exceptional against La Tech. The Huskers go for 312 yards. 312 yards. Which
is solid. I mean, God, if we didn't have 400, we were pulling the razor blades out.
But times have changed, my friend.
It has. And there's some little, I don't know, exceptions and caveats and things like that I think are worth pointing out. I mean, because you look at Harburg, who led the team in rushing from the quarterback spot, which, number one, if your quarterback is your leading rusher, that might be a problem.
Well, that's the Eric Crouch days.
Well, unless you are a true, like the old school Barry Switzer, Oklahoma, Fisher to Barry D. Dowis at Air Force Academy, like the true wishbone offense, if your quarterback is your leading rusher, unless you're one of the, if you're not Oklahoma or Air Force, that's a problem. You do not want your quarterback to be your leading rusher.
Well, look at Jeff Sims early on, and now Harburg.
I get it. It's at some point though. It creates so there's multiple things here. One, you're putting the guy who's your main signal caller at risk. That guy is getting beat up. The other problem is there's a one-dimensional aspect to this where teams can look at you and go, okay, who's going to burn us in this game? Who is the guy that's going to come out and potentially win the game against us? If your quarterback's the leading rusher, that's an easy problem to solve for most defenses. Hey, we're putting a guy on this guy, and we are not letting him get any more than 1 or 2 yards past the line of scrimmage every single time. There you go. You got to be able to spread that ball around. You got to have more than one weapon. And right now, I thought Anthony Grant looked great.
Yeah, he had 135 yards and 19 carries.
Exactly. I think Nebraska's finding some of these other weapons. I feel bad about the fact that when you look at Gabe Ervin going down with the injury, when you look at Ramir Johnson going down with an injury, those are things that are concerning. On the flip side, Nebraska does still have some other weapons at running back, and I hope some of these guys continue to step up like we saw with Anthony Grant. Bottom line is that you don't want to see your quarterback to be the leading rusher.
Now, to be fair, he had 159 yards on 19 carries. Now, the 72-yarder is a big part of that.
And that's the thing. I think the stat that I saw that, again, you got to be a little concerned about was all but 10 yards of that yardage total came on 3 carries. So he basically got his entire yardage total on 3 plays.
So do you look at that differently then, knowing that 3 plays got him the yards and he's still the leading rusher? Because it's not like Eric. That is concerning, or it's not concerning?
It is concerning.
Well, okay, tell me why. Because you still would have had a running back with 135 yards.
I get that. I mean, and there's a positive there too. That it's like, hey, we got a guy. Well, because that was my concern about Harburg versus Sims. Because you could look at Sims and go, hey, here's a guy who's a little bit of a quick strike guy with his feet. This is the guy who could potentially take it to the house from 40 yards out, 70 yards out, whatever. Can Harburg do that? The guy's speed is pretty impressive for a big,
and he's got size.
And same thing as Sims, for a big dude, both those guys can run. I was impressed. I love to see that. The thing is you want consistency though. You want that guy. Like, I probably worry more about the guy that's going to get 8 to 12 yards a carry, as opposed to the guy that we're going to stuff him for a 1-yard loss or a 1-yard gain 9 out of 10 plays, but he's got the potential to bust a big one. I want to stop. I want the guy I worry about the guy that's going to get that consistent 5 to 10 yards every time. Those are the dudes you worry about, because that means in reality you're really not stopping that guy. I liked seeing the big plays. I like seeing the offense. I know Nebraska's a team that for several years we've been talking about, hey, it'd be great to see some of these big plays again. And we're seeing that under this offense right now before our eyes. Everybody's hop on social media. Everybody's bitching about Satterwhite, but he's not Brian Ferentz. So,
Jesus.
But I would like to see more consistency. I'd like to see.
Okay, let me give you consistency.
When Harburg or Sims runs the ball, I'd like to see them get 4 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards, then a 72-yarder. What you don't like is them 1 yard, minus a yard, 3 yards, minus 2 yards, 0 yards, then a 72-yarder.
And by the way, I screwed up. Anthony Grant had 22 carries, not 19. But you want consistency. How about this, Rob? And they're celebrating this now. And I'm going to give you the stat because you're like, God, if we didn't get 400 yards, we had to run stairs. Nebraska, for the first time since 2018, has rushed for 200 or more yards in 3 consecutive games. That's like one of their big notes. Hey,
That's actually kind of a nice thing to see. I mean, if you look at things that Rule talked about coming into the season, one of the things that he talked about was being more physical offensively and having a more consistent run game. That's a good thing. The tough thing about this season
is you grab another beer.
Well,
Jason, the pills for me,
so I'm going with a Rheingeist out of Cincinnati.
By the way, this 6 Point Brewing is pretty good stuff.
Okay, the 6 Point is good. We drank it all.
But yeah, and this thing's a 9.1. This is we're going to be drunk by the end of this podcast. You understand that, right?
Well, I don't know about that.
Oh no, this is 9.1, dude. You just drank a 9.1.
No, I drank a 6.5, dude.
9.1.
All right, we're napping in Trav's basement.
Well, the wife's got pulled pork on upstairs.
There we go. We're gonna eat some swine afterwards.
That's right.
Okay, so the 200 yards per game.
3 straight games. First time that's happened since 2018.
Okay. I love that, and I like the direction that we're seeing. I call that a behind-the-scenes developmental stat because it's things that show, okay, we're moving in a good direction here. And this is something that, God, we had this discussion on Twitter, and this goes back to the whole thing where we were talking very early in the show about Lance Leipold and did Nebraska get the right guy? And everybody's like, oh, well, why couldn't we have gotten a Dion to come in and blow everything up and we win right away? Why couldn't we get a Lance Leipold? Look at what he's done at Kansas. And I'm like, okay, people, keep in mind, Lance Leipold went 2-10 in year one. That wasn't a great year. And everybody was like, did we get the right? I mean, all of the hardcore KU football fans, all 7 of them, were sitting around going like, God, did we get the right guy here? Maybe we should have hired Mangino back or something.
No, I was thinking when Owen went to school at KU, and Owen will remember this, we went down to watch. I mean, they suck so bad. Les Miles was the head coach. We didn't even need tickets. We just walked right in, right? I was watching yesterday. How much has changed? And of course, as soon as my son leaves KU, they get good at football.
They seem like a real program.
Yeah, exactly. And credit. And again, we're going to be big Lance Leipold fans. And I've got a text from Lance Leipold. He tells me during the offseason he's going to come up and be a guest on the podcast.
I would love to pick that guy's brain.
And the reason, Lance and I go back to when his first year at UNO. It was my first year in Omaha. That was 1994. So that Pat Burns staff came in. Lance was a part of it. He went to work for Bill Callahan at Nebraska, came back to UNO, and then the rest is history because he went to Whitewater. But I keep pounding him, hey, during the offseason, because his wife Kelly's from Lincoln, so he gets up here more than we think. So he's gonna slip into the basement. Okay, we're gonna get him into the. Speaking of slipping into the basement,
that sounds kind of dirty.
It does. But Joe Moglia is coming back to the basement. All right,
we love Joe.
So Joe Moglia, of course, former president and chairman of TD Ameritrade. They'd made the big switch to Charles Schwab, former Coastal Carolina coach. I get a text on Friday. Hey, I'm coming to town. Can I visit with you and Rob? You don't tell a billionaire no, right?
No. From an information standpoint, what a gold mine.
True.
Absolutely.
But he's been very, very active in commenting on the NIL space, transfer portal space. He's not going to get his way in this. He's not.
No, but his viewpoint, he makes some great points. And here's the thing. He and I kind of disagree on a lot of
I would agree. But you know what? You can disagree respectfully. And of course, he hired Tim Beck, former Nebraska offensive coordinator, to be the head coach at Coastal Carolina. So we'll talk to him about that move and everything about that. Let's go back to the Nebraska La Tech game. The rushing yard's great. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, see the diagnosis.
Okay, so here's the thing. Sorry, we kind of digressed here a little bit. We were talking about Nebraska, 3 straight games of 200-plus yards rushing.
Yes.
There's some developmental things I'm seeing in Lincoln right now that I really like. It's not going to necessarily pay off this year. If they keep doing those kinds of developmental things, it is going to pay off eventually. And that's why it's God, I don't know if I would phrase it as, hey, I'm really excited to see where Nebraska goes with Matt Rule. I'm buying into Matt Rule. I'm on the Matt Rule train. I'm not necessarily saying that. It's just I'm seeing some things that I think are foundational type
improvements.
Thank you. For a football program that you got to have if you're going to get better over time. And I'm not saying that this season is a lost season or a scrapped season. This is a case of where I'm seeing them make some improvements in real time that I think are going to pay dividends going forward. And even if you look at Nebraska right now and you're sitting there going, God, I don't know if we hired the right guy, I'm still very firmly in that, like, yeah, you know what? I'm seeing some stuff I really do like. Let's give this a couple of years, because I think if we keep seeing this, we're going to end up in a pretty good spot.
I think Nebraska's going to be in a good spot with Matt Rule. I do. It's just, and I talked to some people at Nebraska during the offseason. We were told he would come into the basement. I'm told that Matt Rule is going to make a visit to the basement during the offseason. I'll believe it when I see it. But
would love it.
I think he would have a blast up here, right? But the run block, and we go to it on the diagnosis, is improving. What's not improving, and it was atrocious against La Tech, which is going to lead us into the Michigan game, was the pass block. Harburg was sacked 3 times. His helmet was ripped off once. That dude, he's going to be, if that keeps up, Rob, he's going to be lucky to be alive by the end of the season.
Yeah, although he's not your prototypical quarterback. I mean, that guy's basically he's a small tight end lining up as quarterback.
I get that.
I mean, that's a big, strong, athletic
but
kid.
You can only take a beating for so long.
I get it. And we go over some of the stuff in the doc's diagnosis. The thing that was disappointing to me when I watched the passing game on Saturday is that it wasn't necessarily, hey, this guy just flat out kicked your ass. It was more of this, okay, that was a technique thing. That was a scheme thing. That was a not keeping your eyes up on who you're supposed to have your eyes on kind of thing.
One thing I learned, because
those are correctable problems.
But one thing I learned from you, I never thought of it like this. We've talked many times about how a quarterback, Jeff Sims, will telegraph his passes.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking at his first read the whole way.
Last week we talked about how running backs need to have vision to be able to see the bigger picture. I never thought about the vision of an offensive line because it's so split. It's a split-second decision, right? But you go into deep detail.
All these guys.
Yeah, but I didn't realize that. Maybe it's just because I'm an idiot and I don't pay attention to that thing, and I think
you're a baseball guy.
No. But you see it more with a quarterback. You see it more with a running back. When you slow-mo it and you draw it out like you did on the diagnosis, you go, oh, he had about a half a second, but you have to do it to pick up that block.
Yeah, there is a lot of keeping your eyes up, full field vision that you got to have as an offensive lineman. And we saw in what we're talking about, it was blitz pickups.
Yeah.
Where the blitz is coming from, who are you going to help out with? If you're a guy that's a little bit uncovered on the offensive line and you've got that ability to kind of move around and pick somebody else up, we saw a failure to do that resulted in a sack against Harburg on Saturday, and that's one of those things that we got to see a continued improvement with.
But you understand that the La Tech defense is going to be nothing compared to what Michigan is, right?
What? Come on.
And listen, I think Rutgers is better than most people think. And in fact, if they're during a power rating,
I like their
Rutgers
coach.
is number 5 in the power ratings right now. So it goes. Let's see, the top 3: Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Iowa is 4th. Rutgers is number 5 in the power ratings. Their defense is pretty good.
That's an impressive stat. Yeah, you've got a team that's capable of doing some very good things. They're a very well coached team. Shiano's a great coach. He really is. Yeah, I worry about Michigan. Because what was the final? Was it
31-7?
31-7.
31-7. It was a pretty good game early on, but then I'm telling you, I mean, I like McCarthy at quarterback. He's so good. Corum at running back. That dude's a beast.
Corum's a beast.
He is.
And these are guys that Nebraska's seen a couple of times already.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think McCarthy's great. Corum's great. God, that's a good offensive line.
It is.
That might be consistently, in terms of a tackle-to-tackle across the board, the last 3 to 4 years, the best offensive line in college football.
Wow. That's a bold statement, Mood. But I don't think you're wrong.
Year in and year out, they're probably the best. Georgia's been up there. Alabama's been up there. But tackle to tackle in terms of consistent productivity, that Michigan offensive line has been great. And that's something I worry about. I worry about their defense because I think it's very underrated. I'm curious to see what we see on Nebraska's offensive line here in the next week or so. And the reason I say that is when you look at what we've seen the last couple of weeks, you really want to see Teddy Prohaska out there. Now, he's played a couple of the last time we saw him truly healthy was against Michigan 2 years ago. And that was the game he got injured, really bad knee injury, had that ACL tear again. He was blocking Hutchinson, and it was basically he planted his foot. There was a little bit of a funny twist, and that knee just popped and gave out. But I would love to see him healthy and back locking down that left tackle spot. And if he is, in my opinion, it completely changes the whole dynamic of Nebraska's offensive line. Because if you can lock down that left tackle spot, all of a sudden you can take an extra blocker and move them around to help out at other places. You can have a running back, H-back, tight end. They can be kind of protecting the middle of the pocket a little bit. They can move over and help Ben Hart at the right side. You don't, as much as I appreciate what Corcoran has done or tried to do as a left tackle, when the guy is built like a guard or a center from a skill set standpoint, you got to have a little bit of help for him out there. And I think you put a healthy Teddy Prohaska out there at left tackle, and all of a sudden you got a guy that can go toe-to-toe with some of with first-round NFL draft picks.
I'm sure there's a little trepidation about putting him in there for all the time, right? I mean, because but sooner or later you just got to get here it is, right?
And that's the thing. I mean, they've been playing him. He's been playing in these heavy packages as an extra tight end on a lot of plays the last couple of weeks, and he just lights dudes up on these run blocking plays. It's just, God, he is just head and shoulder. Okay, that was horrible. The guy's like 6'11". I just said he's head and shoulders above anybody else. But he is. From a pass protection standpoint, from that skill set, Teddy is head and shoulders above anybody else on that offensive line. He really is. And it just, God, it changes things. All of a sudden, you got somebody who can lock down the blind side for the quarterback, and you can take that help and move it elsewhere. God, that would be great to see him back. I don't know. I mean, teams these days, everybody's so mum about the health of the players, and I totally understand that.
I don't.
Yeah,
because the Big Ten's requiring you to release before the game anyway who's playing, who's not playing. So you're going to know beforehand.
It's just, it'd be nice to know if he's healthy or not. And God, I hope he is, because, man, the guy is a game changer. He really is.
Michigan comes into the game averaging 405 yards of total offensive game. They only give up 231. Here's a level of consistency, Rob. This is impressive. East Carolina, they opened the season with, beat 30-3. Turn around, beat UNLV 35-7, beat Bowling Green 31-6, beat Rutgers 31-7. I mean, that's consistent across the board, just score wise.
It is. What's interesting to me, there's, other than Rutgers, who we already talked about, well-coached team, probably a little better than what I think people give them credit for. It's not a super tough schedule.
It's not. No, it's not. Nebraska.
And it's not like you look at Nebraska and go like, oh my God, the Huskers have played this absolute gauntlet.
No,
they haven't either.
The one thing Nebraska has going for it against Michigan, and I'm giving the crowd credit here, is that it's at home. That's about it.
Yeah.
And I can't think of anything else. Is there anything else Nebraska has that gives it a bit of advantage? I don't know. I'll drink something weird next week if Nebraska wins, but I just don't see it.
I don't either. I mean, I think Nebraska, when you look at the strength of Michigan's schedule, I think Nebraska is a team that fits in there with somebody like Rutgers.
Do you think the 3-3-5 throws anything off offensively for Jim Harbaugh and that offense? Or
yeah, they'll figure it out.
They do, I know. You know, that's another thing. Harbaugh, when he first started Michigan, total douchebag, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it.
He had – so you see a lot of coaches try to work – I call it the shtick angle.
Yeah.
It's like row the boat with Fleck at
Remember when they went to like Rome and all these places for spring football?
Yeah, it just...
And then when he was going to get fired, he just like shut up and just started coaching. And you're like, oh, you're a pretty good coach.
Yeah, if he just shuts the hell up and coaches, I think he's good. But the shtick thing came out at... you didn't see it at Stanford so much. It kind of surfaced at the 49ers. And I don't know if it's something that it's kind of internally within his own head created a distraction. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're right though. He shut the hell up and just started coaching a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden, Michigan became a really, really good football team.
And yeah, and they're really good this year. How about this, Rob? They're 22 of 40 on third down conversion. That's 55%. Against La Tech, Nebraska, not very good on third down. Just 3 of 11 on third down.
Yeah, actually, I thought that was one of the brutal stats for Nebraska. For Michigan, there's a consistency there that they've developed. And it's kind of these fundamental things that you love to have. They play really, really, really good defense, and they have for the last 3 or 4 years. They have had, I already said it, probably over the last 4 seasons, consistently the best offensive line in college football. They've had steady quarterback play. It's not like anybody's looking at McCarthy and going, okay, well, this guy's like the next Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa.
Well, the interesting thing about McCarthy, and I'm going to bring this back to the Iowa game, because everybody thought Cade McNamara was going to be the second coming for Iowa, right? And everybody's like, well, he's putting up Spencer Petras-like numbers. Here's the deal. Cade McNamara had a really good cast of characters around him when he took him to the college football playoff. You need an entire team. One guy in college football is not going to – this isn't basketball. One guy in basketball can light it up. One guy in football isn't going to win a bunch of games.
Yeah, but when I look at Michigan last year, was that McNamara's team or was that McCarthy's team?
It was see, McNamara got hurt. Remember, first of all, he got benched. But McNamara took him to the college football playoff the year before.
He did.
But he did it with a really good team around him.
And then he got beat out by McCarthy.
Yes.
So, I mean, I kind of lump that into a lot of times you got to be really careful when you look at these transfers. And people look at oh, hey, dude, we just signed so-and-so from Georgia or so-and-so from Ohio State. They were a 4-star kid coming out of high school.
And there's a reason they left.
Exactly. There is a reason they did not crack the starting lineup where they were at.
Or if you feel like you have to leave, Jeff Sims. There's a reason they left.
Exactly. McNamara left Michigan for a reason, and that reason is named McCarthy.
So how about this? Michigan has only allowed teams into the red zone 6 times this year.
That's a great stat. Who's their D coordinator again? I keep blanking.
Sorry, you dropped that on me.
Sorry.
I know. Let's let our producer look that up while we're talking about this. So,
nice.
Oh, and the defensive coordinator for Michigan, if you can find that.
They've played great defense the last several years.
They have. They really have.
They got Ernest Hausman.
And they've only given up 1 red zone touchdown. The other 2 scores have been field goals. One red zone touchdown of 6 times in the red zone.
That's a brutal stat. Now, those are stats that, as an opponent, you hate hearing that. Because that's like abandon hope, all ye who enter here kind of stats. Little Dante for you there.
Have you read the Divine Comedy?
Yeah.
You have read the Divine Comedy?
Yeah.
Like books on tape, or did you actually get the Divine Comedy and read the damn
No, I
thing?
read the book. I mean, I was a senior in high school. But
You would love to go to the Basilica di Santa Croce in Florence, because outside of the Basilica di Santa Croce is a massive statue of Dante. And
Nice.
they don't know where I don't think they know where Dante's body is, because inside the Santa Croce, Galileo's buried there, and Michelangelo is buried in the Santa Croce. But Dante was like banned.
They lost Dante.
Well, he was banned from the city. So, but now you realize
why was he banned?
because he didn't go along, he didn't follow the rules. He was kind of a rebel rouser, and so I don't know if they know where Dante's body is, but there's a huge statue of Dante outside.
Probably dust
Yeah.
now.
Well, that's true.
But you want Michigan or Michigan State?
Michigan.
Okay, it looks like Jesse Minter.
Jesse Minter.
That name's completely not ringing a bell for me.
He's the defensive coordinator, huh? Huh.
For the Wolverines.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Guess what? Jesse Minter is a pretty goddamn good D coordinator.
He is, isn't he? Yeah.
So anyway, I guess, yeah, I look at Michigan. That's a tough row to hoe.
Yeah, I mean, I just chalk it up as that you're going to lose that game.
Yeah, I mean, now you look at Nebraska 2 years ago in Lincoln. Did I expect to see that? Not necessarily, but that was a Nebraska team that, man, they lost every single game they played by an average of, like 2.5 points.
Yeah, well, that's so true. Of course, it is Beat Michigan Week at Husker Hounds, 25% off court heads. It's getting cooler outside. It's the perfect time to start wearing fleece. New fleece is arriving daily, and 25% off selected fleece items now until kickoff of the Michigan game. 2 locations in the Omaha area, the Superstore at 84th and Center, and out west at 171st in Lakeside Hills Plaza. Or you can make it easy on yourself. Go to huskerhounds.com, where you get free shipping on orders over $50 and a flat shipping rate of $4.95, anything under $50. Don't forget, if you need legal help, Connor Orr at Orr & Horrigan is the attorney that we choose to do business with and talk to and have on the podcast, because he's a smart dude. He's a J-sker. He's a hockey fan, and he's passionate about NIL. Connor is a friend of the podcast and a licensed sports agent in the state of Nebraska. He works directly with athletes and businesses to help them navigate the ever-changing landscape of name, image, and likeness. Connor also focuses on corporate and personal injury litigations in both Nebraska and Iowa, and he can work with you on your business planning, estate planning, and real estate transactions. Call Connor Orr today at 402-408-6488. This was one of the better weekends in college football we've seen in some time.
Great matchups.
Great. You had Ole Miss, Alabama. You had Clemson, Florida State. Congratulations on the Florida State win, by the way.
That was kind of a fun one. Took it overtime, though.
Yeah, but that's what makes college football fun.
It does.
It does.
Which, I mean, a lot of people, you see a lot of these games. People were kind of bagging on Florida State. Well, God, Clemson's not that good. You look at who they've lost to. God, that's a rivalry game. Those two teams do not like each other. And Clemson still has some very good athletes. It's a well-coached team. Dabo's a great coach. And it was in Death Valley.
In Death Valley. That was a great comeback from Florida State. They're going to be in this thing at the end of the season. Of course, you had Ohio State and Notre Dame. And
so some of the Notre Dame, the way that played out at the end of the game, holy cow.
Did they have 10 guys on the field?
2 plays in a row.
Oh, that's bad.
They only had 10 guys out there.
Especially on the pass. The run, that's a yard. I think you're going to get it. But the pass, that extra player.
Brutal.
But there was some smack talk in the Ohio State Notre Dame game. And it started on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN. And by the way, McAfee makes College Game Day the best show in the world. I know that's going to piss some people off, but College Game Day has gone
Let me rephrase that. Pat McAfee might be great. Game Day's not.
Yeah, but McAfee gives it a different energy. It does. It just, to me, it should just be get everybody else off and let McAfee do whatever he does, because McAfee's he's awesome. But Lou Holtz was on the McAfee show. I think it was on Friday, and had this to say.
Notre Dame is a better football team than Ohio State.
Love hearing that. Please, Coach.
And let me tell you why. We have the best offensive line in the country. Sam Hartman won't even get his jersey dirty all year. He has time to throw the football. The offensive line, we have great running backs. Esteem is averaging about 10 yards a carry. We have great receivers. So offensively, we're set. Defensively, our defensive line's better. And you look at Coach Day, and I coached at Ohio State under Woody Hayes. We won the national championship when I was there.
That's right.
So I'm proud of that. However, he has lost to Alabama, Georgia,
Right.
Clemson, Michigan twice, and everybody that beats him does so because they're more physical than Ohio State. And I think Notre Dame will take that same approach.
Now, first of all,
well, so a few things here. Number one, everybody doesn't beat Ohio State.
No, it doesn't. Well, he brought up the big games, right? So
Yeah.
that's what he was talking about.
I get it.
Now, Lou Holtz.
Freaking hate Lou Holtz.
Do you really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. You hate Lou Holtz?
It's a Notre Dame thing. When he was there, I just,
Okay, but you bring up a very good point. No, Lou Holtz loves Notre Dame. Even when he was on ESPN, he eats, shits, breathes, pukes, you name it, it's all Notre
he
Dame.
sweats
He does.
golden domes.
Okay? It is what it is. And you know that
Damn,
going
are you
in.
having another 6-pointer?
Damn.
I'm going to start calling you Brian Ferentz all
Jeez.
these 6-point games.
Okay, but Holtz is like one of these lovable guys. You
No,
just
he's
kind of
not. He's a douche.
Yeah, well, see, that's where you and I disagree. And I'm not a Lou
I
Holtz
have
fan.
never been a Lou Holtz fan.
People forget that Lou Holtz is a head coach at Minnesota. Isn't that hard to believe?
He was head coach at Arkansas.
Arkansas is where I remember him. When he went to Minnesota, I
Okay.
thought that was weird. He was the head coach of the Jets. Hell, remember that. But
yeah,
Lou
that
Holtz,
was pretty forgettable. Even for Jets fans, that's forgettable.
Lou Holtz is like a caricature of himself. He's become like Chris Bourbon. I mean, what's the speech and everything like that? I mean, he's just one of these. He's fun, lovable guy. Okay.
No, he's not.
Okay, Rob says no. This is after the game. Ryan Day, head coach of Ohio State, says it's always been Ohio against the world.
A lot of people took a lot of shots at this team over the last 48 hours, and it really hit home to me. And the way that our team played, not only did we physically get after these guys last year, but we did it again here at the end of the game. And I think it says a lot about this team. And I'm really upset and disrespected by what Lou Holtz said publicly about our team and Ohio State and Buckeye Nation. And we're not going to stand for that, because that's not even close to true. We had one bad half a couple years ago up in Ann Arbor. We did in the second half. But every game we play in, we're physical. We are. I don't know where that narrative comes from, but that ends tonight. This team right here showed toughness. They showed grit. They didn't give up, and they found a way to get that last yard. And I'm sick over those short yardages that we didn't finish, but that's the game. And the last matchup game we were in, we were one play short. This play, we finished it the right way, and I'm really proud of our team. I don't know where he gets off saying those type of things. I don't. I mean, I have some other things I'd like to say too, but I'm not going to say that because I'm more respectful than he is.
See,
I see. That's the kind of stuff that I'm just like. I think I agree with you on this. If you're Ryan Day, dude, just shut the hell up.
You come off as a dick.
I don't know about that. I think you come off as somebody who is worried about outside influences that at the end of the day don't really actually influence anything. And that's what's disappointing, because that was one of the things that I liked about Tom Osborne is when I played in Lincoln. You don't think we didn't have those same outside influences. Now I get the fact you didn't have social media, you didn't have the media in general compared to this, but it's not like we cared what anybody else thought of us. You had more of a focus on yourself as a player and as a team, and you didn't worry about what anybody in the media said about you.
Here's the deal. Lou Holtz is 86 years old. It was like Weekend at Bernie's on that stage. He looked like a dead man up there just talking, okay?
Well, that was Lee Corso.
Well, don't even get me started on Corso. Why ESPN didn't ditch him, I have no idea. And I get it. You're trying to be respectful. The dude is stroked out, and it's bad television. It really is.
It really kind of is. I will give you that.
Lou Holtz is off TV now. They had him back because he's Notre Dame, and McAfee had him on the show. But he's just an old dude up there
you just
talking.
told me you love Lou Holtz.
I like Lou Holtz, but Ryan Day comes off as the dick here.
Well, he does, and Ryan Day comes off as the guy in the position as the head of an organization, as the professional who is basically going out and completely publicly admitting he allowed somebody else to get under his skin.
Yeah, because you know why? And if somebody gets under your skin because of that, there might be a hint of truth to it. Remember, when you get called out for something in front of a group, in front of a meeting, and you get defensive right away, it's probably because they're fucking right.
A little bit. Damn,
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
No, I mean, it happens to me.
No,
I
get
overreact.
that.
I'm like, oh my God, I got caught. I'm gonna have to fight my way out of this.
If it's completely not true, you don't worry about it.
You don't care.
Yeah, you really don't.
You're like, whatever. What a clown.
Well, but that's the thing about coaches and about football teams. Nobody wants to be called out as lack of toughness, lack of physicality. Those are, that's fighting words for football. So I see that, but the thing is from a professionalism standpoint, that's one of those things where it's like, guess what? We won the game. We're just going to let that speak for itself. That's like the best defense ever. That's the best comeback ever, is you just went and won the game. And people can talk about, well, Notre Dame only had 10 guys on the field for those last two plays. It was a last play win. So let's say Ohio State loses that game.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a close loss.
And they're going to say, but Lou Holtz is right.
It's a one-score loss against a very good Notre Dame team at Notre Dame, national TV, huge spotlight on the game. Whether you're Notre Dame losing the game or Ohio State losing the game, there's some games that you lose and you're pissed you lost the game. You're upset you lost the game. I will never step back and say, hey, there's good losses. But there's losses that are less, I don't know the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, Ohio State.
Damaging.
Yes.
Whoever lost this game, it wasn't a damaging loss to either team.
Well, if you ask Paul Feinbaum, whatever about Paul Feinbaum.
When it comes to people whose opinions I do not listen to, Feinbaum is one of them. He is the dumbest smart guy ever.
He's the guy. And
he's
listen,
a shill.
He's the guy. He didn't even play sports in high school, right? I understand that I wasn't a college athlete, but I played sports. 4 sports all the way through high school. He got
bullied by the chess club members.
He did. He really, really did. He says Notre Dame's out of the playoff because they lost. I'm like, I wouldn't go that far. Losing to Ohio State by 3 points isn't going to knock you out of the playoff yet.
Although it kind of creates a dynamic here because let's say Michigan and Ohio State remain unbeaten until the Michigan-Ohio State game. And let's say that's a close game. One of them picks up a loss. Both of them could end up in the playoffs. But you could still have Georgia in the playoffs. You could have Florida State in the playoffs. You could still have LSU in the playoffs.
You're right. I want to go back.
Alabama only has one loss to a very good Texas team. Alabama could still be in the playoff. Texas could still be in the playoff.
There's a lot.
There's a lot of good.
There are
undefeated / one-loss teams that could be in there. One loss could be pretty damaging.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm agreeing. It's like I hate to say this. For once, I think this might be the first time ever. I'm actually kind of agreeing with Feinbaum.
I want to backtrack a little bit to behind the point spread last week. And Ryan Day's reaction to this. Don't tell me you got to pee.
Keep talking.
Do you got to pee?
I was chugging water before.
Oh, my God.
I'll be right back.
So I'm going to have to set this up as Rob walks in front of the camera, and he's going to go take a pee. But it's very interesting here to what is happening with Ryan Day. And I want you to go back and watch Behind the Point Spread from last Wednesday, because Ryan Day actually came up in this conversation. And Ryan Day is feeling the heat. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what are you talking about? This guy has done nothing but win football games since he's been at Ohio State. But what happens when you lose to your rival Michigan? What happens when you're when you're not winning national championships, or even competing in national championships, or making the college football playoffs? A fan base gets restless. A fan base that demands and wants national championships gets a little bit restless. You had him talking earlier about why you even play in Michigan at the end of the season? Why don't you play him in the middle of the season? Why do you put so much emphasis on that game? It's your number one rival. The final game of the year is awesome. It brings it to like a crescendo, right? I mean, it builds up, and usually that's for the Big Ten title game or in the East Division. But Ryan Day's reaction to me is one that, and Rob, walk around the camera so you don't walk in front of it, because I'm walking right into this. I'm doing a monologue right now, man. Ryan Day's reaction goes back to what we were talking about on Behind the Point Spread last week. And Scott Spreitzer kind of made and Rob joked around and made the call that if Ryan Day were to lose to Notre Dame and then lose to Michigan this year, he would get fired. Rob, his reaction, I think...
Spreitzer?
No, Ryan Day's reaction shows you the amount of immense pressure he's under.
He feels the pressure.
Yes. So absolutely.
Okay, well, because Spreitzer kind of hinted at, I can't remember Scott's exact phraseology, but he basically discussed or talked about just, there's some pressure there. Now, it might be perceived. It might be real.
I think his reaction says it's real. Ohio against the world? Fuck you. Come on.
So, when you first say that, I'm sitting here going like, okay, dude, you really think Ohio State is going to get rid of a guy whose average record since he took over as head coach is what, like 11.5 to like 1.5? I mean, that's his average record. I mean, it's sick. The guy is basically an 11-1 coach every year since he hit the door at Ohio State. I would say that is bullshit until you start going back and looking at history. And the history I'm looking at is go back to John Cooper, and you go back to it would have been Gary Moeller at Michigan.
Hell, Earl Bruce at Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, and Earl Bruce was like, okay, Earl Bruce, a little different because he was kind of like Ohio State's Frank Solich.
Yeah, replaced Woody Hayes.
Yeah, so he comes in, and he was a very good, solid coach. He was like your 7 to 9 wins a year kind of guy. Wasn't beating Michigan because that was Schembechler at the time, correct?
Yeah.
And then Schembechler retires. John Cooper comes in. And I thought Cooper was a great coach.
Couldn't get over the hump.
But the kicker with him was, if I remember the stats correctly, I can't believe I remember this. Go look this up.
He was 2-10-1 against Michigan.
Okay, I was going to say 2-11 was what I had in my head.
2-10-1 against Michigan.
Actually, I had it 2-9 was what I was thinking. So he was 2-10-1.
2-10-1.
People forget ties used to be a thing.
Wow.
There was no overtime when I was there. Yeah, John Cooper got fired.
He was 192, 84, and 6 at Ohio State.
He got fired for no reason other than the fact he was 2-10-1 against Michigan.
Won 3 Big Ten titles.
Wait, they had a tie?
Yeah.
I don't remember that. That's interesting. All right, so he won how many Big Ten titles?
3.
So 3 Big Ten titles, 2-10-1 against Michigan, gets fired, and is replaced by Jim Tressel, correct?
Yep.
Who promptly wins a national title, and the rest is history. And you go from Tressel to
Urban Meyer.
I'm thinking about the whole thing where players traded sweatshirts and bowl game jewelry for tattoos.
So,
he gets fired. Although he got fired for when they investigated. He got fired because he denied it happened when he knew it happened.
Which is now perfectly legal under the NIL rules.
Yeah.
So the interesting part about this, you have Ryan Day, who's upset about a former head coach. He's 86 years old. Get upset and start calling him out personally. Dan Lanning becomes a social media star because of his pregame speech yesterday before Colorado, and basically saying, we're not doing it for clicks. We're not.
He called his shot. He was Babe Ruth walking up and
called his shot,
pointing up and
but
saying, "We're hitting the home run."
That's an
here.
easy shot to fucking call. Everybody knew he was going to kick the shit out of Colorado.
Yeah.
Everybody knew
I'll give you that.
Okay. My point is, and Dion handled it okay afterwards. He said, that's an old-fashioned butt whooping. He goes,
Yeah.
But you know what? I'll remember, and you better do it now because you're not going to do it. I get that.
Who else said that?
Yeah. Who?
Scott Frost.
Oh, yeah, Scott Frost. But I guess we've seen it now with Dion with Nebraska. We saw it with Dion in Colorado State. We've seen it with Dan Lanning and Oregon and Colorado. We've seen it with now Ohio State and Notre Dame, even though that coach that he got pissed at doesn't coach anymore. Is the decorum of college football changing? Is it turning into politics to where now we're becoming more personal, us against the world type thing, where we're just going to, fuck it, we're going to take shots at everybody?
I think I see a loss of decorum. Now, you and I were talking about this a little bit before the show.
Yeah.
I think it's society-wide.
There was a sacredness about college football, though, to where, yeah, you would hear rumblings of, Kirk Ferentz and James Franklin fucking hate each other, but they never really said it.
You didn't see it in the open.
In the open.
You
what
wouldn't
I'm saying
have
is,
seen you wouldn't have seen
yes.
Ryan Day calling out Lou Holtz. You
Yeah.
wouldn't have seen the Washington State coach did it with Lee Corso.
Yeah.
I don't even know who the Washington
You know
State
why? Because
coach
nobody
is.
gives a fuck about Washington State or Oregon State.
Guess
Nobody.
what? Lee Corso said the same thing.
And then Herb Street and all these guys tried to backtrack. It's okay to say nobody cares. There's a reason they haven't been invited anywhere because nobody cares. I don't care if they're in the top 25. Nobody cares about the Beavers. Nobody cares about the Cougars. It's just a fact of life. You're good right now, fine, but nobody cares about you.
From a media money standpoint, they don't bring anything to the table. Now, I'm not saying they're not good schools. I'm not saying they're not good athletic programs.
But nobody cares.
I'm just saying they don't bring anything to the table financially when it comes to TV contracts.
Zero.
And so you're right, nobody does care.
But now
people do care about Notre Dame and Ohio State, so let's focus on that from a decorum standpoint.
And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, are we going to go the political route where you have Trump calling out somebody? You've got, and Democrats do it too. They all do it now. It's like the standard practice.
It is, but you didn't see that as much before Trump. And when you had a guy, let me ask you this.
I don't think you saw it before Dion. And I'm not blaming Dion for it. I look at Dion and go, oh, that's Dion. It's his brand, right?
So you saw, you had Dion's in sports prior to this.
Not coaches, though. Not where they call out other coaches. No.
Yeah, I mean, you might be
rare.
right on the coaches thing. You definitely had it amongst players, though.
I get players.
Players would do it all the time.
Yes, that's bulletin board material. I get it. But
and Dion's a player, though.
That's a fair point. I'll give that to you.
I mean, I'd be the first to admit, there's former players that have gone. There's an insane number of former players that have gone on to be coaches. I mean, like the Manginos and the Charlie Weisses and the Belichicks, the guys who were not high-level players who went on to become high-level coaches are a little bit of a rarity. Most of the guys that coach were very good players or had a fairly high amount of playing experience. But I mean, Dion is Dion's Dion. the Deion you see right now
is the Deion that's been around forever.
That's the Deion you saw at Florida State.
And that's why it's almost more, I can buy into it because he's been consistent over time.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, and that's the thing that's interesting about this is that, you know what, Deion has rocked the boat. Deion has made waves. At the end of the day, no one is surprised about what Deion's doing at Colorado and how he's doing it. And that's we could do an entire other podcast about Deion and the whole dynamic there. But that hasn't surprised anybody. Do you know what's a little surprising?
What?
Ryan Day and Lou Holtz.
Yes.
That's a little bit surprising.
I would agree with you.
The Washington State coach and Lee Corso. That's a little bit surprising.
And that's what I look at the Lou Holtz and the Lee Corso thing, and I'm not a Lee Corso fan. Again, I've said it publicly. I'll say it again.
I love Lee Corso. He should have retired.
Yeah, exactly.
Years ago.
You had a stroke and you can barely speak. Okay? Let's just call it what it is. But at the end of the day, you've got these two young guys picking on old dudes, and it just looks like ageism. It's like, really? You're going to let two old geezers get under your fucking skin? Come on.
Well, I don't know if it's ageism, but I mean, there's comments being made that
And by the way, that's their job, is to make comments and opinions. Right? I mean, Lou Holtz was there to give an opinion. He was there in front of the home fucking crowd to say, get him fired up.
Yeah, now, I actually think Lou Holtz was... I thought he was well within boundaries in terms of what he said. I'm not sure Lee Corso knows what planet he's on right now.
And that's what I'm talking about.
And what he said, I thought was a little bit out of line because it was kind of a cheap shot.
It's like the nobody's watching bowl.
Yeah, that was a total cheap shot. And he said it twice. Now, no, Herb Street popped in with the whole no, he was just trying to make the comment.
Because Herbie loves him. Herbie's going to defend him till the cows come home.
I get that, and I appreciate that because guess what? I've drank beers with Corso.
Yeah, I remember that night.
At like freaking 2 a.m.
I remember that night.
He's a great guy. He's a wonderful person. He's smarter than hell. I'm not sure he knows. That is not the Lee Corso that I've met and drank beers with. And so this is one of those situations where I look at that. What he said, he should not have been in a position to say what he said on air.
I didn't.
And so I get that. But
you know what, Rob? What he said is everybody's thinking. When he said it, you're like,
I get that, but there's a degree of decorum there that I thought a line got crossed. I don't think it really got crossed.
What if McAfee would have said it? Your silence says everything. It's okay. Because that's Pat McAfee. Because people go, oh, that's...
It is. And here's the thing. Corso's a former coach.
So is Lou Holtz.
I said Lou Holtz was within boundaries.
You did.
Yeah, I don't think Lou Holtz really crossed much of a line. That's why I look at Ryan Day and I'm like, wait, you let that get under your skin? Now, the Washington State head coach, hey, Owen, could you look up for us the head coach of Washington State? I don't even know who it is, which is basically backing up what Lee Corso said about him. The fact that I don't know who the guy is. But
Dickert.
Who?
Jake Dickert. Dickert.
I have no idea who that is.
Neither
All right, Coach Dickert. And here's the thing. There's a decorum line getting crossed when you're Ryan Day or you're Coach Dickert and you're getting upset about this
shit. Let me tell you the difference.
Or you're getting publicly upset about this because here's the way you handle this. If you're truly upset about this and you want to make a mark as a head coach and show somebody, hey, you said this, it bothered me, and here's why it bothered me. Fuck. Go the Tom Osborne route. Write Travis Justice a letter.
And Tom Osborne was notorious for writing single-space letters. If you don't believe me, ask Lee Barfnick. Ask myself.
It happened to you.
I got the phone call. When the phone call came from Tom Osborne, you just went, oh, fuck.
Are you going to be allowed into the South Stadium Lounge for the next media days?
Let me tell you the difference between the two. Lee Corso didn't call anybody out by name. Lou Holtz called Ryan Day out by name. That's the difference between the two. Why Ryan Day took it personal. Washington, he's like, nobody watching bowl.
I'll give you that, but I mean, it's one of those.
And either one I don't have a problem with. We give opinions, Rob.
Yeah, I got a little bit of a problem with both Dickert and Ryan Day's reaction to it because few things say you got under my skin.
Yeah. Never let him see a sweat. The old right guard commercial. Never let him see a sweat.
Yeah, in medicine, our joke about it is like we need to write just a prescription for Triactin. Like Triactin, like you've been there before.
Exactly. It's not that hard. You're the fucking head coach of Ohio State.
Yeah, be a professional about this. Really, you're going to let that get to you?
Yes.
You're going to let a talking head get to you. Now, and I get it. There are coaches that bugs, and there's coaches who worry about it. And I understand the fact that you there's a perception of your team that you want to make sure that there's an image or a brand that you want to protect. And as a head coach, you want to protect that. But there's right ways and wrong ways to protect that brand. And I don't think Dickert or Ryan Day did a very good job of protecting their own brand.
I just don't want college football to become politics. I don't want it to be somebody calling out somebody, just these personal shots. I fucking hate politics right now. I do. I hate this. You've got to pick a side. If you don't pick my team, well, you're an asshole. If you don't pick the other team, well, you're an asshole. Guess what?
Well, pot calling the kettle. I sit in the. I'm
as middle as it comes. I'm as libertarian as it comes. I'm going to pick a Republican. I'm going to pick a Democrat. I'm going to. Just the way I am. I'm not picking a team. Don't make me pick a team. Right? And don't make me do this in college football. College football is on Saturdays. I just got to relax. I got to get away. I just got to enjoy a game. I don't need this bullshit of personal attacks.
So you hate Jesus, is what you're saying?
I hate Jesus Christ. I'm going to hell. Did I just say that? That's the beer talking. That's a good time to hit that, right? And I don't hate Jesus Christ. Okay, just to let everybody know, I don't hate Jesus. I love Jesus.
I'm like crying over here. I'm laughing so hard, dude.
Hey, if you haven't watched the Doc's Diagnosis, we've talked about it a lot. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be up on Monday and Tuesday. It's brought to you by Centris Federal Credit Union. Follow us here. It might be a great time to start planning and preparing for those home repairs or renovations on your to-do list. Our friends at Centris Federal Credit Union can help you explore ways to check some of those renovations off your list with financial help with a home equity loan or home equity line of credit. Centris Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA, equal housing lender. Behind the Point Spread's coming up on Wednesday night. It's brought to you by Betfred Sports. Subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Show for college football information.
Yeah, and if you want to talk to Owen personally, he usually screens the call, so you can say, "Hey, Owen, what's up? What's up?
Wasabi."
And a big thanks to Husker Max for distributing the podcast. Head to HuskerMax.com for the latest news and opinions from a variety of voices. They let everybody on there, which is super cool. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. Follow me at Travis Creates. Follow or like the Doc Talk Sports Facebook page at Doc Talk Sports. And I've said it again. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. You will not be disappointed. And if you haven't subscribed to this podcast on whatever channel you're listening to it on, do it right now. We've consumed a lot of beer tonight, Rob.
We're priming for the Joe Moglia show.
That's right. That's coming up in a couple weeks. For Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We'll talk to you next week on the Doc Talk Podcast presented by Betfred Sports.